after
Okay, let me do a quick introduction, Elizabeth.
okay.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Wow, that was a wild a wild we just got through a whole hour, almost an hour of pre-recorded content that you guys want to register for this international summit to get. It's to say it is amazing is an understatement. You get to hear a lot of Miss Elizabeth was wow, she's a way better interviewer than I expected to even receive from myself. She has blessed me tremendously, and like she's going to bless you as student artist, equipping the current and future euphonium artists, musicians alike around the world with a roadmap to a successful dream life. And Elizabeth, I can't thank you enough for being willing to share your time, your experience, and what you're about to continue to share with us right now. And further ado, I'm going to introduce you, let people know who you are, and then we can get going for this recorded, video recorded interview. Wow. Elizabeth Raum has established herself as one of Canada's most eminent composers, with her works being performed throughout North America, South America, Europe, China, Japan, and Russia. Her works include 5 operas, over 80 chamber pieces, including interactive soundscapes with live performers, 17 vocal works, choral works, including an oratorio, several ballets, concertis, and major orchestral works. Because of her friendship with the late tubist John Griffiths of the Pershing Army Band, like the top premier band of the Army Band system, and because she is married to a trombone euphonium player, which is really cool. And if you want to learn more about that, go back and to read the transcripts because we covered a little bit about that. She has written a large number of works for low brass, including 4 concerti for tuba and 2 for trombone, and a slew of euphonium works that wow, y'all. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us on this recording. Wow. Tremendous.
We've talked for almost an hour about how life leads where you don't expect it to lead. And in my case, being a composer, I did not expect that at all. I was an oboist. Since I was 14, I wanted to be an oboist. And I played in the Atlantic Symphony in Halifax, Nova Scotia. It was a touring orchestra. And because of that, by then I had 3 children. We were on the road all the time, and I felt other people were bringing up my children. So my husband got a job teaching at the University of Regina in Saskatchewan, and we moved there, but I had to give up my principal oboe position, and I went to Regina. It was a much less orchestra, and I had a big hole to fill, so to speak. The composition teacher there, Tom Schudel, had a dream to write country music type things. Schudel and Raum hits, we called them. He would write a tune, and I would write words to it. And we got them recorded, and he went to Nashville and tried to sell them, but didn't get anywhere. So we decided maybe we were barking up the wrong tree. We should try an opera. So I wrote an opera libretto for him. Now, this is before I composed, and he didn't do anything with it for a year. So he said, why don't you write something? Well, at the time, this is 1980, around then, and there were very few women composers that anyone had heard of. You didn't have the internet, you didn't have anything. So to me, that was a very strange idea to compose, but I thought, well, I'll give it a try. When I was a little kid, I used to write tunes and things like that, but I didn't really think of that as composing. Anyway, I wrote the opera. I wrote the first aria, and I thought, my gosh, is this what composing is? You write music to something that you want to hear, and that's what composing is. anyhow, I wrote it. I wrote the opera. The university put it on, and this Canadian Broadcasting Corporation recorded it. Someone came from that to the opera production and liked it, and they recorded it. And that was my start. So
Wow.
I ended up now, I had no training in this. I had theory. I had very strong theory background because I went to Eastman, and very good theory there. And John Griffiths, who I'm sure a lot of you know who he is. He was a premier tuba player, lived in Regina, was a good friend, played in the orchestra with me. And I got a CBC commission to write something. And he begged me, write him a tuba concerto. And that's when I wrote The Legend of Heimdall. So that was my first big tuba work. The CBC recorded it, and we have since, John and my husband and I went to St. Petersburg, Russia in the year 2000, and we recorded it professionally there. It's on the CD that John made, The Legend of Heimdall, but it also has my Concerto Riva del Garda, Concerto del Garva, and the Persian Concerto on the same CD.
Wow.
Anyhow, that's when I started composing. And it, I never looked back. Now, one of the questions you asked was, what was the difference then and now in my method? Well, then you had pencil, and I worked at the piano and paper. And if I felt that I needed to add something, I had two methods. One was to cut the paper and tape in more measures. The other one was to put a coda sign with a number on it, coda 1, coda 2, and then write it on another piece of paper. And I had to keep all this in my head to try to keep track of where I was. Then when I finished the whole piece, then I took clean paper and lightly penciled in the new piece, the finished piece. And that's when I did a lot of rewriting, because I take these pile of papers all taped together and make them nice and tidy into a piece. And then I practiced calligraphy. I learned how to write with a pen, because that was the only way you didn't have Xerox machines then. I would have to do it on transparencies, which were another problem, because when you make a mistake, you could scrape it off, or you had to cut the wrong note out and tape in another piece of paper and then write on that. So it wasn't like you couldn't white it out.
Right.
And that was the only way you could do it. So it was so laborious, but it made you think. Then the computers came, and it was actually John, again, that made the difference, because he was going to the ITEC conference in Riva del Garda, Italy, when Roger Bobo ran it. And John wanted to play something so badly. He had been accepted as a soloist, and he really wanted something new and different. So he begged and begged and begged. And finally I said, okay, I'll do it, just to make him stop. And I thought, I'm going to try doing it on the computer, because it's faster. By then the computers had gotten so that they would actually print things out. Before that, it was impossible. It only had, my first computer had 250 Ks of memory and no hard drive. I had to have an outside hard drive, and it was so slow, it was ridiculous. But I got the new computer and Macintosh and Finale, and I was able to do that. And the beauty of that is, if you need to add 8 measures in the middle of the piece, you could cut and paste with the computer. So you just slip it in there and you write. You can also, what I did, I wrote the Persian Concerto. Concerto del Garda. That's what I wrote for John, the first one. And I was able to made it sonata allegro form. When I got to the recapitulation, I was able to take the first section, put it into the second section, and the computer transposed it. Whereas before that, I would have to write every single note out like that. And I did it as a sonata. It started out as a sonata. And John said when Roger heard it, he said he sat there and stared at it for such a long time that John started to be afraid that he did such a bad job that he didn't know what to say. And John was getting very nervous. And Roger said, "Who wrote that?" And then the next thing Roger asked me if I would orchestrate it for him and he would play it at the Tuba iTech when it was in Minnesota, which I did. I very happily orchestrated it for him. And that started the thing. That and The Legend of Heimdall were the first two pieces I did for tuba. And then I did another one. John, again, had a situation. He wanted me to write him a piece. So the Persian Concerto was actually written for my husband, who was a euphonium player. I believe I dedicated it to him. But then I did a version for tuba as well, for John. Because John premiered it. I guess he played it with a Persian band, Persian song. That's why I called it the Persian. Yeah, that's right. It's coming back to me. This is a long time ago.
So if you want to know any, so for our viewers that are watching this, I'll put all the links to all her stuff below, and it'll be on her profile for y'all to check out. She narrates a lot of the reasons, the intentions of why she writes certain things on her website itself. It's really amazing to see a composer so integrated into her own work, their own work. It really is. I got to read some of your own like intentions and purpose behind why you write. So it kind of like it makes this my position as just being the interviewer a lot easier, because you've already done a little bit of work beforehand already on your website.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, one of the questions you asked me was, where was it? Wait a minute, I gotta find it.
Sure.
Advice that I might give to a new young composer. My advice would be, don't get sucked in by any of the fads. That was one of the things I've been criticized quite a lot because I write tonally. My greatest influence is Bach, and I think you talk to a lot of composers and they'll say the same thing. I'm also hugely influenced by Beethoven, the way he worked his themes into everything. Let's see, you have it's developed, the way he developed his themes. He was a master at that. Brahms, the way he orchestrated. Now I play in it. I just recently retired from the oboe, but I've played in an orchestra since I was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
And that's the best orchestration teacher you can possibly have. The other person, for instance, is Scarlatti. I mean, you can't imagine that, but if you listen to any Scarlatti, I swear he starts out with a tune, with something, and then he turns it into something wonderful. It reminded me of when I was a kid, there was a cartoonist who would have someone from the audience come up, just draw a line, anything. And he would take that line and turn it into a cartoon, a perfect cartoon. And that's what I feel like Scarlatti does that. He takes what he starts out and I think, what is he going to do with that? And then he turns it into something phenomenal.
That's so abstract too, a lot, especially for a euphonium player, a euphonium artist, you know, from beginner to collegiate, is that abstract element to performance or even composition is a lot of us can't get, like myself. I want to learn how to play jazz, and I want to learn how to improvise and stuff like that. And I've heard some amazingly phenomenal performers.
Yeah.
And just to get outside of that box is fantastic. And you're exactly right. Get outside the box. Yeah.
You know, it helps. Just listen. My mother was a jazz pianist. So, and my husband is a jazz trombonist. So I hear a lot of jazz. My two grandsons, they're studying jazz. The one is actually studying jazz and classical. He prefers classical. The other one, he's a pianist. The other one is a guitar player. And their theory is impeccable. They're only 14 years old, but you know, it's a difference between jazz theory and classical theory. You know, classical, you stay in one key. Jazz, you go, it's more vertical. You know, you pick a bass note and you work from there, which I think is smarter. It's a lot easier to work with, that's for sure. But you're right. Listen, you have to listen and get a feel for things.
Who did you start taking? Did you start taking composing lessons when you're? I'm assuming since your mother was a jazz pianist, did you learn composition from watching her or listening to her?
No, she wasn't all that keen on my composing. I always thought that she lived till she was 100, and generally didn't want to listen to my music. And I think maybe she felt she could have done better, and I'm sure she could have. She was incredibly talented, but I never studied composition, not really. When I went to University of Regina, when I was there playing oboe in the orchestra, I thought maybe I'll try studying composition. But by then, Tom, the Tom Schudel, who was a composition teacher, and I, who had worked on our Schudel and Raum hits, he just didn't feel like he wanted, it was awkward. So we would meet for coffee once a week and talk about, well, what are you working on now, Betsy? And that was the extent. But as I said, I learned orchestration from playing in an orchestra. Theory, you got to know theory in order to compose decently. And I play piano well enough so that I have a feel for it. I'm not a pianist, but I play piano well enough. And it just came naturally. And for some people it does. If it doesn't come somewhat naturally, I don't know if I would do it.
So don't force it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, don't force it. Yeah, do something else.
That's really interesting. When you're in the transcriptions before this, that's not being video recorded. You and I were covering your time up in Saskatchewan, and it's really fascinating. It sounds like that moment when you were tasked to write that piece up there was that the moment? Was that your aha moment of?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
Oh,
It
wow.
was. Okay, I wrote the opera that Tom
Yes.
and I wrote, and he said, why don't you write it? And I thought, me write an opera? So I took one of the arias, one of the poems that libretto, and I started writing, and I thought, is this what writing is? You write something you want to hear, you write the music down. That was when I realized that it wasn't some mysterious thing, walking in a forest, like Beethoven and listening to the birds. It was just writing what you want to hear, armed with the ability to write it down. Now, I've known a lot of composers today, especially, who don't use keyboard and don't even use notes. They write things down. Someone else, what do they call it? They ghost it.
They transcribe it, or
someone else writes it for them. They sing it, they tell them what they want, and someone else writes it. But that's now because of computers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, you have to be able to write it down. I would recommend, if anyone wants to go into composition, play the piano. You don't have to be a great pianist, but you got to know how all these notes fit together, how they sound. In fact, when I was young, very young, I would try to play through the Schumann concerto, or all the big concertos. There was no way I could do it. I did it very, very slowly, but it taught me about an awful lot about how chords come together.
Chord structures and everything.
Yeah, that's right, for structure. And it taught me an awful lot about what a pianist can do, because I couldn't do it, but a real pianist could.
Huh. That's interesting, because one of our other contributors in our interview, she lets us in as well as an insight as a composer, is writing out. So what you're saying is it's a different element and a different perspective, which is great. And that's why the logo for Farm for Dreams, if you see it right there, is a diamond carrot. Each diamond has a lot of facets, and each way you look at that diamond is a different perspective, a different way of looking at a piece of music, or an idea, or a principle, or whatever it may be. With your perspective here, and going through maneuvering your fingers across the keyboard piano, of a Schumann or Bach, Beethoven, Vivaldi, or any work of inspiration that an artist feels inspired by, get to understand the context of the structure. And it doesn't matter, you're saying it doesn't matter that you know how to play, if you can have a grasp at the keys, I guess you could say it like that.
Yeah.
Grasp at the keys, and then in addition to what she brings, Dr. Don Sontag, of writing it out, each score by hand. If you want to start somewhere, start with those two methods to become one of the most prolific composers in your circle, and be able to do stuff like Elizabeth Raum, Dr. Don Sontag. I mean, both of these phenomenal composers have written lots of operas and librettos, something that I never considered as a euphonium player to even grasp hold of. And if that's the same for me, what is it for you? Have you heard of any euphonium player besides the one that I just interviewed? Marina Bozelli is on her way to Paris to play in one of a new opera that has actually written euphonium part.
Huh. Euphonium is, I've always thought it was really a beautiful instrument. It's like a very masculine French horn.
When did Richard okay, so Elizabeth's married to Richard, and you can see kind of a dialogue between her world and the military army world, and the low brass world in general, throughout her website, which is linked below, or on her page, on her profile page, at Farm for Dreams. Is when did he first play euphonium specifically for you?
Oh, I think he always did. When he has an interesting background too. He came from I won't say a non-musical family. They just weren't into music at all. And when he was 7 years old, the music teacher recognized talent, and they got him a trombone, and he took trombone lessons.
At 7 years old?
Yeah, and they had this,
Wow.
what was it, Vicky's Stars of Tomorrow, something like it. It was a radio show, and he had to play, and it was little kids, but he tells the story about how they went and got him. There was a snowstorm. He's in Philadelphia, and they needed a slide at the end, and so she went through the snowstorm, got him to the radio station to do this thing. Then, as he got older, his teacher, Al Leopold was the name of his teacher. If you ever look, he's an incredible player.
Yeah.
He got him his first trombone, and Dick worked in the store to pay it off, because his parents didn't, they just weren't into music at all. He bought his first trombone. I'm not sure when he started euphonium, but he played they had a band. So he learned the treble clef, the British brass band style. He can play in any clef, and I'm not even sure how he learned any of that stuff. He plays any style of jazz. He went to Tanglewood, it played classical, played extra with the Boston Pops, extra with the Boston Symphony. So he was, one of a lot of brass players, a lot of players play each, and he was one of them. That's why it's kind of neat with the boys, with the grandsons. They took trombone lessons with him, and they're doing great too.
That's amazing. Wow, what a legacy.
Yeah, that's right. It is.
That's really exceptional.
They got, and then they're the boys, the grandsons' mother is my daughter, who's one of Canada's top violinists, and Erica Raum. You can look her up. And their father is is Omar Daniel, who teaches, he's head of the music department at Western University. And he's a composer, but he's a really far out composer. He doesn't write the same kind of music I do. In fact, he wrote one piece where he hangs by his feet and he's connected to a computer with his hands. If you look up Omar Daniel, the playing of Marcius, you'll see a bit of that. And then Erica, my daughter, she fortunately has a trick memory. She memorized the violin part. She's hooked up to a computer with a microphone. So is he. He developed these gloves, and the program is on a floppy. So that tells you how long ago.
So most people don't. So a lot. I'm going to just put it out there. I don't. And if you know what a floppy is, and I'm not talking about the 3.5. We're talking about the old floppy, like the big one, right?
Not well. It was thicker, a little thicker.
Yeah, the black one, right?
Yeah, it was no after the 3.5.
Okay, so the black
one, zip drive, a zip.
Okay, so yeah, so that was when the USB drive started to come out.
Yes,
shortly thereafter.
Oh, and I love the USB because I didn't have to go through the mess. I could just plug it in. You have no idea. For young people, everything is so darn easy now. No idea. Sometimes I feel guilty because it's so much easier than
it is. It really is. I remember being in college and USBs just came out, and I had I think 128 megabyte USB, and that cost me like $30. Oh man. That's dating it right there.
I have a 30 terabyte backup.
Right 30 now. Terabyte. Well, that's right now though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's well, with amount of work that you do and that you have at your disposal, I'm sure it's at least half full, right?
I have no idea. My son-in-law said I needed it, and because I couldn't get anywhere without my two sons-in-law, because they're both they know exactly what they're doing, and I don't always. I know my programs. I know Finale, but
so you use Finale?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So have you used any other program besides Finale, or do you just?
I tried Sibelius, and I thought, why am I bothering? It does exactly the same thing, but I know Finale, so why would I switch?
So did you start with Finale since its inception? Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I'm curious, with a lot of these younger artists, they have a term called beta tester. Were you one of the first people to utilize Finale? Okay, so
you know what? When I first got Finale, it was a disaster because I was using it on my, what did I say, 250. It was the name of the computer, K250K or something like that. That's all you had. So it would take forever, and I had an outside drive, and the two computers would talk to each other. You hear, and then if you put a little bit too much, it dumped everything. So I lost everything. I got rid of the computer. I said, I never want to see one of these again as long as I live. And I bought the thing for several $1,000s. Yeah. It was useless. And I had a dot matrix, whatever you
dot matrix, yeah, dot matrix.
And I had that, and if you sweat on it, it would blur all over. So I thought, I'm sick of this. I'm just going to go back to pencil in hand. And a couple of years went by. My son, who is now doing research at Berkeley, is brilliant. He insisted that I get a word processor, and I said, okay, I'll get a word processor. And then he went and got a real computer, which I was so angry that he got it. I didn't want to have anything to do with computers. But by then they were good.
Now you're talking word processor. A lot of people now, I think, equate word processor as a computer or a digital tablet. You're talking about the Brother word processor, right?
It was a PC.
Oh, it was an actual PC. Okay.
That's cool. It wasn't a computer. Actually, I wanted. I can't even remember. I can't imagine that he got me a Macintosh, an Apple, because he's a PC person, but maybe he did. because I don't remember having any computer but a Macintosh. And there was a real problem with Macintosh where I lived in Regina, because nobody could service it. Nobody. And not only that, but the telephone, SaskTel, they didn't know how to fix it either. And once a lady called, I couldn't get the thing to work, and my internet. And I called her, and she was going to talk me through something. And I remember she was really, really rude. And she says, if you go up in the upper corner, there'll be I don't know what it was, whatever, a letter. And finally, she wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise. I said, okay. I'm up on the left-hand corner, and there's an apple with a bite out of it. And there's a long silence. I'll get you to someone else, she said, because she didn't know how to use it. There was only one person in the whole city that could help me with a Macintosh.
Wow, that's incredible. So when you first started writing music up in Saskatchewan, how did you seek out inspiration, or did you write while the orchestra was playing, or how did you?
Yeah, I was playing in the orchestra and writing at the same time.
Wow.
I mean, not in the same room while I was, but yeah, I was doing that. Once I started writing the opera, I would have to say I was driven. I have always been driven. It's an obsession. I have to keep writing. I have control over that. I don't have control over life.
So you just when your pen starts, you don't stop at all for a break?
I take a break, but I'll spend so many hours working that I can't see anymore. I'm getting blurry, and so I have to stop. But yeah, I'm really obsessed.
So in that inspiration, when you do end up stopping to have your vision return, do you how do you go back into the mindset of where you left off?
Oh, this is where it works really well. This is why I can write so much. I have a very bad memory, and I'll write a whole bunch of stuff, and then I'll go have lunch, and I'll come back and play it. It'll be like I've never heard it before. So I can be so objective. I can tell exactly what's wrong with it. I can say that didn't balance, or where the heck was I going with that phrase, and then I can fix it up. And then I go have supper, and then I come back, and once again, it's a constant correction. A taste filter. I have a really good taste filter. So I filter out the bad stuff, rewrite it. But it takes, you think that the computer would make it faster, but I'm so fussy. It's when I did it with a pencil, in some ways that was faster because it was such a pain in the neck to change anything that I kind of left it. Whereas with a computer, I can do it, and I think, do I like this better? Do I like that better? And there's so much soul searching going on, you wouldn't believe.
And
the thing is, when you write music that's tonal, people think the hardest thing is to write it like it just happened. It's so easy to write atonal music because you can write just about anything, and nobody knows if it's good or bad for the most part, especially if you have good performers. If you write something that's flashy and you have really good performance, it's going to sound good. It's going to sound exciting, but you can't necessarily say it's good music. It's a little bit the way art is sometimes where it's displayed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing in the National Gallery in Ottawa. It's 3 stripes. I don't know, that became famous at the time because they spent a small fortune for it. That's all it is. 3 stripes, big, huge. And people talk about how awe-inspiring it is. And I think, no, it isn't. It's 3 stripes, but it's beautifully displayed with a light on the side. And, I think an awful lot has to do with that.
Well, that's fascinating.
When I write, it has to be right. The notes have to be right.
So do you ever, when you're composing something for each time is the first time you come and approach it, it seems like, when you approach something, do you find yourself going to hear, when you do take your breaks, do you hear other maybe something that would influence that particular writing, what you're doing during that time?
Not really, unless I'm looking for something.
Ah,
Sometimes I might, you listen to Stravinsky, you think, gee, maybe my piece should be more bombastic. Maybe I could throw in another, some timpani or something like that. That would be the extent of it. I wouldn't, just that if I get really excited about something, but generally I have kind of an idea of what I'm doing. Plus, I have to write for whoever asked me to write.
right.
If I'm writing for a chamber group, I'm not going to try to pull a Stravinsky, write a spring.
So when you let's just use that example, the Stravinsky example, when you are searching for that extra element per se, like a Stravinsky example, do you go back to that score and see how he wrote it in the approach?
I mainly see how he got that sound. Like, in the Firebird, he has the cross grain harmonics where the strings go up and down.
Right.
That spot is with a bird wings. And I have to see how is that notated. That I'll do. And I recently had to write a harp piece, which was very, very difficult. Because I'd never written for harp, and you write for harp completely differently from anything else because it has to be enharmonic, and you have to worry about the pedaling and the string changes, and like if you have repeated notes, you can't say you want a repeated E. You have to have an E, F flat, E, F flat, E, F flat. Because it has to be two strings. So all of that it took me quite a while, and I worked with a harpist. But for the most part, when I look at a score, I listen to something differently, completely differently. So I just listen to the music, and if I'm curious about how something was achieved, I'll try to. Nowadays, you can get the scores off of IMSLP.
Right.
But back in the old days, you had to buy the score or go down to the library. You could find one in the library.
So that leads me to what's your favorite condensed score or actual score, like a physical hard copy? What's something that you like to kind of like a fine chocolate? What's your go-to score?
I don't have any.
Oh, really?
No. My husband got me Final Alice. David Del Tredici, is that who wrote that? I can't even remember now. Final Alice, because I had written another opera, which was recently filmed.
Wow.
Called The Garden of Alice. And it's very Kafkaesque. Alice goes to, she falls asleep, she goes to Wonderland. In the original, when she goes to Wonderland, it becomes horrible because Wonderland has no reason. And in the end, the creatures come after her. But the Jack of Hearts that she defended in the trial about the stealing the tarts, he stands between her and the creatures that are trying to drag her down. It was done in New York, actually, and it was very interesting. Have you ever been to Sleep No More in New York?
I wish. I haven't been to. The last time I was in New York was on a family vacation. My dad was going to the Marine Corps ball. That was many moons ago, and we never stopped to visit anything arts in anywhere in the Northeast.
Well, this is the newest thing. As you go through, they have a building where you have tunnels and things, and you
Wow.
go through there. And the people that did it had this idea. They had each scene in a different spot, and the audience went to each different spot. And in the end, when the Jack of Hearts is going to rescue Alice, the lights suddenly go down, and they have this whole thing, which they had made a video of what social media has done, and how the new rabbit hole is social media. I thought that was brilliant.
That's very symbolic, and I actually that's really symbolic. I think my oldest son would like that because he talks about a lot of the wonder lust and wondering that people do while they are online, and they just get lost with the scrolling and whatever it is, from games to scrolling. They get sucked down that hole.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's what the producers of this version were had in mind. I thought it was brilliant to do that at the end. I didn't write it. Then they went back to Alice Escapes. In my version, Alice Escapes, and in the version that they did, they filmed, it was during the pandemic, and they thought it was too negative, and so I had to rewrite the end. And she wakes up and she's in the hospital. Oh yeah, that's another thing. The woman that did it the first time, the premiere, was an up and coming singer, and she sang in Final Alice, Tradici's original. She was on the premiere. She had to sing through a bullhorn even. But
Wow.
anyway, this was like 30 years ago, and they were going to redo it, and I wanted her to sing the part of Alice, but of course she couldn't. She was 30 years older. She could sing it. She sung on the Met. You know, she's one of Canada's top singers.
Wow.
But so I had to rewrite it, and so I had her have COVID. She goes to the hospital. She starts to hallucinate, and everything's the same till it gets to the end. They wanted a happy ending, so I had to make her wake up and see the beautiful garden outside the window.
Well, I guess that could be symbolic for either two ways of how life is to go.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. It's like
That's interesting.
and it's woman.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh. I'll have to go check that out. And when I find all this, I'll put this on the on some links below. Wow. Oh, that's really cool. Final Alice. That's exquisite. Okay, so
Well, the Final Alice is David Del Tredici.
right, but with Alice in Wonderland, taking
I
that
call that the Garden of Alice.
Garden of Alice. Thank you.
Alice. Yeah, and the whole point being the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Alice.
Okay, that's so that actually leads into a question that my son actually helped me form. My euphonium performer, euphonium artist son. He all the intention that goes behind writing music, and you bring in that element right there, Garden of Eden, Garden of Alice, that framework, that base element of kind of what you have to imagine to put yourself in those shoes almost when you're writing music or when you're playing music, playing what the artist or the composer intended for you to feel, to be a part of. And it's really you that almost sounds and it's a big word, transcendentalist. You go beyond a different level when you bring in certain other elements.
It helps that I played in an orchestra. I got the flutes on one side, bassoons, clarinets, brass behind me, percussion. My other daughter plays percussion, strings all around me. So I got a feel for the musician, a very strong feel. I think it's not like I'm coming in a vacuum.
Right. And that's by any means is not where I was intending. That does really capture the relationship with John Griffiths and Roger Bobo, and all the conversation that we had prior to this being video recorded. Is you seem to capture the essence of the artist who is commissioning you to write something.
Oh yeah. That's true. That's kind of an important part of it. It can't always happen, but I always like to get a picture of the person I'm writing for. Just and I don't even know. It just I feel like I'm talking to someone.
Right.
So I get a feel for it. I might miss the mark. I don't know, but
according to all the records, you haven't missed very many marks. All those writings.
I wrote a piece for a oboe player once, and the picture he sent me was himself with a drum when he was 2 years old. And there was something about that drum that was important to him. So I wrote a piece for strings, oboe, and percussion, and called it the Phantom Drum.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And how did he like that?
Oh, he loved it. He loved it. And he played it. CBC recorded it. And I've actually since
Wow.
redone it several times. I did it with piano, and someone else did it. I rewrote it for flute. She wanted it for flute. That's the beauty of the computer. Honest to God, back in the old days, you'd have to write down, you have to transpose everything. Now you just put it in there. You change, drop it an octave, bring it up an octave, change the key. There are just so many things you can do.
That's really awesome. Yeah.
That's the reason that I've written so much is that I can. Someone writes and they say, "Can you do?" I play whatever else. I just wrote a piece for what the heck was bass drum on saxophone and piano, and somebody wanted they wanted it for trumpet instead of saxophone. Wasn't hard. It was easy enough to fix.
That's really cool. So
Yeah.
what's your process? What would you say your process would be when evaluating projects and the complexity of that project?
The level of the performer stuff is the first thing. You don't want to write a professional thing for kids, you know. And then what was the rest of the question? What was
just evaluating the project? How do you take on the commissionings and stuff like that? And you've captured a lot of the elements, and so I kind of want to gear it towards something new and some new information, a new perspective. When you're going to compose for an artist, how much time do you set aside to do that, or do you just when you start something, do you just go at it?
It depends. First off, I want to hear the artist. That makes a big difference. So I know, how far I can go or whatever. When I wrote Heimdall for John, that was my first attempt at a tuba thing. And I don't know how much people know about John, but he had a freakish high register. And I didn't know it was freakish. I thought, I didn't know tuba could go up to a high E, things like that. And I'm talking the E fourth space in the treble clef. And so I made it higher because I thought it sounded beautiful up there. And then I got chastised for that because I realized, Roger told me, he said, too high. I realized then that that's not normal for a tuba.
It's not normal, but it's definitely something that's attainable for very few.
Yeah.
And those very few are those that are kind of the signature performers who are being the face of that instrument.
Yeah. Well, yeah. John always insisted on playing the euphonium version of everything. The piece I wrote for euphonium was House Book. That's one of my favorite pieces. And that John would play that. It's also scored for orchestra and band as well as piano. But John insisted on playing the euphonium version, which didn't work as well, I didn't think, for a tuba to play because, he's up high. Euphonium up high is strong.
Mm-hmm.
It's powerful. Tuba up high has a totally different sound. It's like falsetto almost. Mm-hmm. An octave lower would have been strong, but he wanted to show off his high register. Anyhow, when I wrote Heimdall, I took quite a long time thinking about what I wanted to write because tuba, that hasn't been that much of a solo instrument. I had never heard, other than, I don't even think I had heard the Vaughan Williams back then.
Oh, wow.
I've never heard a tuba solo. And so I wanted to make use of it and make it, well, for me, the tuba was heroic sounding. It was big, strong, basso profundo, but still had the agility. And so I found a book of myths and found Heimdall. And I thought, this is perfect. So that's what I ended up doing. That's how I wrote Legend of Heimdall.
That's
But it
extraordinary.
took quite a while to think about what I was going to do.
Huh. That's really cool. So what, how do you, have you been able to have anyone under your tutelage to study under you?
I don't really teach composition. I have one student because the parents, I don't know, I think he must be 11 by now. His parents just kept after me and kept after me. And he's a brilliant pianist, but has a long way to go composition wise, but he's so fast. He learned finale, I taught it to him like in a few days. He had finale. He's got things that I don't have, but he has a newer version. I told his parents to get him a synthesizer because before that he was putting it in note by note, which was silly. Anyhow, he's my only composition student. He's getting it. He's, slowly he's getting it. I think I write an awful lot of what he does, because I say, no, that note doesn't work. Try this note, that kind of thing.
So we've spoken a lot about your family and especially your mother with a jazz pianist. When did you tell your specifically your mother the day that you found out or thereabouts that you're tasked to write that opera?
Oh, that's, you see, that it's been a hobby. It was a hobby back then. I didn't even mention it. That I was, I played oboe, and that was like a sideline.
So
Completely.
so you went to school for music for oboe.
Yeah.
Did they try to sway you from going and pursuing music as a major in the college?
Well, my mother was very happy for me to be an oboist. Because oboe sticks out.
It does.
Enjoyed that, yeah. And my father didn't really care. The girls could do whatever they did, kind of thing. He would have been happier if I just got married and had babies. Old fashioned. But that's when I started composing. I don't think they even, I guess they came and saw Garden of Alice, and my father was quite enthusiastic. I'm not sure if my mother was or not. It was just not anything that was important to them.
Huh.
It wasn't important to anyone except John Griffiths and the guy at CBC who thought this is really neat. We've got a new person. Other than that, I didn't really
see that's really phenomenal. Your experience, and that was your first shot was a broadcasted or recorded recorded work. And is that what got you like significance to where publishers were saying, yes, we'll take your work?
Well, it did. When they recorded the first opera, it's called The Final Bid. It was with piano reduction. I wrote it for orchestra as well. If anyone wants to produce it, let me know. But it was a piano reduction, and the CBC recorded it. Now there's an organization in Canada called the Canadian Music Centre, which is a distribution center. It's a library. They loan out music up to 5 parts for free, and they will even pay for the postage coming back. I'm not sure about this outside of Canada, but in Canada they will. You can download it. It's cheap that way, it's a PDF, or you can buy a copy. They'll bind it. And that's who has an awful lot of my music. And then, so that was the main thing at first. I did have a couple publishers, which I wouldn't do it now unless you keep the copyright. I didn't know enough, or you couldn't keep the copyright. And back then, when a publisher took something, they had to do the engraving, and that was expensive. So, like for instance, my trombone concerto, Olmutz concerto, was published by BIM, and they had to redo the whole thing. So, because it was in manuscript, hand manuscript, and that didn't work. Everything else, there was also Virgo has some of my music, and but then I stopped sending it. Tuba Euphonium Press had it.
Mm-hmm.
Don Mills, is that? I can't remember. But anyhow, he sold it to Cimarron,
Mhm.
Brian Doty. And so he has all my lower brass music, and Gordon Cherry Classics
Cherry
has
Classics.
an awful lot of music. And that's really all I send it to anymore. There are a few other people who have asked, as long as I keep the copyright, I'm happy. And then they said, give me 10% or something.
That's awesome. So what would be 3 tips or strategies that you've learned over the years and have adapted from when you work with in working with individuals?
What strategies?
Like of your tips and strategies that you've learned over the years?
Well, one thing that I don't know if it's a strategy or a tip, is don't go along with fads. That's what I say. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of people have to go along with fads because they'll never get anywhere if they don't. Right now, it's just so much going on politically that you have to be very careful that whatever you present is politically correct. And I just kind of ignored that. Like, I just wrote an opera called The Romance of the Gods about Persephone falling in love with Hades because of a spell that Hera and Zeus cast over them. And I tried to get a grant for that. No way. That's not it's not politically anything. You have to have, I tried to make it like Demeter. I tried to make the mother environment, because she's the goddess of growing things.
Right.
And Persephone, female strength. And, but you couldn't, I didn't fool them. But I would say don't go along with fads. Be true to yourself. Fads don't last forever.
So did you end up writing that, or?
Oh yeah, I wrote it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I
yeah.
can't. I look forward to hearing that. It sounds I love mythological studies. Did a lot of that in my high school and college years.
Oh yeah.
It's a lost.
Yeah.
It seems to be lost with the newer kids.
But they keep changing. The myths change every 100 years, I think. And I just changed it. I have Persephone falling in love with Hades.
Well, that's really awesome. It's a different perspective for sure.
Yeah.
So, what would be your top 5 books or top books that have impacted your life over the years and possibly helped to find kind of that drive that you have?
1984. No, not really. That's not. That's all I can think about anymore. But the one that is The Rest Is Noise by Alex Roth. You know that one?
No, not yet.
Oh, that's a great one. Let's see, was that the name of it? I'm sure it is. The Rest Is Noise. I wrote it down, but I forgot where I wrote it.
That's quite all right.
Oh, wait a minute. It's amongst your questions.
Yeah, that's the last one.
Oh, is it?
It is.
That would be on page 3. Oh yeah, there it is. The Rest Is Noise. Listening to the 20th Century. And that's a paperback. And it was Alex Roth. And he has, well, you can do it online. He also had a CD, but you can find things online, demonstrations of everything. And it was kind of interesting. After the Second World War, apparently the CIA put a lot of money into foreign music festivals for contemporary style music because people didn't get the same nationalistic feel. They wanted to get rid of music that people that's why I was interested in your playing euphonium in Iraq. You had to go right out there, and all I could think was they used to have to do that with the bagpipe players, the Scotch, and they would lead them. They would actually, because it gave the army strength.
Yeah, the morale.
Yeah, the morale. That's right. And they wanted to destroy the morale, so they got rid of the music and replaced it with you're not taping any.
No, I am. I'm still taping, but I
They
want,
want,
you encouraged me to showcase kind of the background of my wall, and you just mentioned that,
oh,
and
yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm sharing. I don't share this outside of like lives and stuff like that, outside of the International Euphonium Summit just yet. It's just like the rest is noise, and how you're talking about how a lot of history is not known. I didn't know about the CIA's involvement with uh, funding contemporary music in that regard, to push out or to draw out various elements. That is mind blowing.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was quite surprised at the amount of, because you wonder, how do those festivals get so popular? Where do they get the money? Because generally the music isn't something that it's kind of interesting at best, but it's not Beethoven.
Right? It's definitely not Beethoven, and that it does make a lot of sense. I tend to love how our government is involved, and I've read quite a few really amazing books to understand kind of the interplay and the dynamics that goes on with contractors, and especially in the coffee field, with some of the background I have. I enjoy learning all the different dynamics at play. Um, and I did not even consider music as being a big influence till what you just said. And I'm definitely going to leave the link to that below for
That song, try that in a small town, or the rich south of Richmond. Is that the name of it? Have you heard that?
no,
Try
not
that.
no,
Oh,
the book I'm referring
oh
to
no, this
is,
isn't a book. This is a
oh,
song that
oh,
is massively popular right now. Try that in a small town. Just Google it.
I
And,
will.
and the other one, I think it's the rich south of Richmond or some such thing. I don't know. Those two have just exploded.
Huh.
And music, the thing is, it's not classical music anymore that makes a difference. It's pop music.
Right, pop or whatever gets the kids to hit that virality of whatever song is happens to hit that whim. And there's an interesting interplay. I was listening to a broadcast, and they were noting a similarity of sorts between the S&P, the stock market, and the number one hits of the uptrends and the downtrends. They're the same frequency or some kind of similarities.
Yeah.
And it's like it's really cool. I mean, because I mean, when you go to a grocery store, you hear different songs,
Yeah.
and or even a coffee shop, or well, I mean, I guess it would just be stores and coffee shops and maybe gift shops. You hear music that's going on, and it either slows you down or speeds you up.
They want to speed you up to get you out of the store. That's
Right.
right. That's a known fact. You know, just think about the Chinese Cultural Revolution, you know, where they got rid of Western music, and now they're the best amongst the best musicians. You know, it kind of the pendulum swung, but it's a very powerful thing, the music.
Yeah, what's really interesting, you mentioned China there. Will be I'm hoping to have um Gong, the director of low brass of China, I believe that's his title, the director, Gong Liang. Oh, I'm going to mispronounce that. I don't want to butcher it
Yeah, yeah,
at all. Um,
you'll find out.
yeah. Okay. Gong Hong Liang is interested in providing doing an interview for the International Euphonium Summit. Hence the reason why I've asked for support from those that are linguistically talented in especially Chinese, maybe Mandarin,
Yeah,
definitely have need for those that are linguistically talented. I can't do everything myself. That's
no,
what I've found out with doing these interviews. These are robust, I mean, exquisitely robust interviews that Miss Elizabeth Raum has provided our student artists, the families, even the professionals, the history of music encapsulated. And it's just, starting with euphoniums as kind of the outside, the outcasts in a way, and starting with us as euphonium artists, and then reaching further into other artists, instruments, archetype. This is just the start, the tip of the diamond, or tip of the iceberg, as you were to say, of this summit base for Farm for Dreams. There's such a big vision, and you're I would be delighted in my lifetime to see the full capacity reached, and hence the reason why I've started now. And I should have started a few years back, but the fact that you start now and you're going to make mistakes along the way, cut it out. You can make edits, just like Miss Elizabeth Raum said with her scores and even manuscripts. Just cut out those pieces of and you might want to frame them later, like the conversation beforehand, before this live recording on video. You do want to capture your history, because and that feeling, the authenticity in life, you want to capture that as a parent for their student artists. Capture those moments, spend those times with them, and have them understand perhaps an intention or a drive of why you are perhaps later on in life, what you're doing, the impact that you would love to see or have, the impact that her mother had on Elizabeth's life with playing jazz piano, that's covered in the transcripts, not so much in this video recording, and the relationships that we go through in life, and how they somehow interconnect and weave in and out, lace one's life up into something beautiful. And it's when it's really interesting that symbolism as that's coming forth. It's like a chrysalis with a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. And these student artists, where they're at, and if they continue to watch and glean information and the resources that you've imparted and so willingly contributed to us, the richness is by any means, wow, it's so valuable.
I'll just give you one last thought.
Absolutely.
Okay, you know what, when I am about to start something and I just can't face it, I always say, don't think, just do.
Don't think, just do.
If I start thinking, I won't do it. So I don't think, I just start. Those are my final words.
I love it. And with that being said, thank you so much for joining us for the International Euphonium Summit and contributing. Just hang tight. We'll wrap up after I end the recording. Thank you, everybody, for watching this amazing interview. Like everything else hit that. This is all provided free for everyone to view on YouTube and any other media platform for no cost, for you to reduce that barrier, for you to get started, to just do. Don't think, just do. Start now, as the great Elizabeth Raum would say, as she did say. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to leave a comment. What's your biggest takeaway below? And share with your friends, other family members, and can't wait to see you next time. Serve well, everyone. Oh, wrong. I did it again. They changed the